The basics of an SBA loan is this. The bank is lending you the money direct. Bank is lending you money directly, but the U.S. Small Business Administration, the SBA, is guaranteeing 75% of the bank's loan.
Today is very special. Lisa Forrest is back again, and we're going to talk SBA and other business acquisition loans. Lisa is a proud new member of Northwest Bank. You can tell us a little bit about that, Lisa. And of course, this is the Getting the Deal Done podcast, and Lisa is really good at getting loans done. So welcome.
Thank you, John. Really appreciate it. I know are we going on 25 years of working together? I was just thinking about that. I think we
Pretty
have almost a
close.
quarter century under our belt, and I think we're just getting better. But thanks for having me. I really appreciate it. I
Yeah.
love your audience.
This is our regular because they keep changing the rules on you.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah,
So tell
and
us a little
yeah,
bit about Northwest Bank.
yeah, thank you so much. Yes, I'm with Northwest, and my colleague Sarah Andrews, my partner Sarah Andrews, who a lot of your audience knows as well. We're at Northwest Bank now. We're going on week 3, and we're really excited. Northwest Bank is based out of Columbus, Ohio, almost 17 billion of assets, and we're a full service bank. We have a physical footprint with branches in 4 states: Indiana, Pennsylvania, New York, and Ohio. But then we're doing, from an SBA standpoint, we're doing deals in the 48 contiguous states. We're a PLP lender in the 48 states. Hawaii and Alaska coming up next. They have a little bit more nuance on the servicing side of things. But we are a growing SBA voice. We are what I like to say a fresh voice in ETA, or entrepreneurship through acquisition. And Sarah and I are over here helping to build on what Northwest has been getting done so far. Very collaborative on all of our interactions, and that's why we're over here. Just a real collaborative voice.
Good. Well, you talked about the ETA, which can always bring a smile to people's faces. And let's talk about buyers and buyer profiles and what does it take for someone who wants to buy a business? And we have different categories. We're not talking professional buyers like family offices and PE, but we have corporate executives who have 20, 25 or so years of experience and say, I'm sick of the corporate world. And then we have very young crowd that take some classes and wants to buy a business. And there are definitely differences in experience and skills between those couple types of individual buyers.
Right, absolutely. So, our kind of mid-career searchers or mid-career acquirers are that first element that you talked about, where you've got 20 plus years, 15, 20 plus years of resume experience that has a really nice proportional lead in and directionally proportional to a personal financial statement. So the ability to bring in your own funds and have post-closing liquidity. That mid-career searcher is for me anyway, for Sarah and myself, are highly coveted. You mentioned the kind of the next generation of entrepreneur that might be coming to this from a younger skill set, and there is still room for that profile. We are looking for, well, I'll just be a little blunt. You can't have zero. You can't be bringing zero to an acquisition structure from the buy side. And there's a lot of social media out there. There is a lot of noise around 100% financing, no money down kind of stuff. And John, you and I know that is absolutely, there's no place for that in this business acquisition world, to be blunt.
Well, there is,
So
but it's a distressed business, and that's not what any bank is going to do.
yeah, good point. If we're talking buying good cash flowing businesses at a reasonable multiple that you can come in and then grow, we are looking for resume. May not be direct industry experience, but it's definitely going to be transferable industry
Hmm.
experience. And we want a personal financial statement that's in proportion to the sort of enterprise value that we're considering here. And sometimes my sometimes my kind of answer might be the not now. It's not never, but maybe not now. Maybe down the road. Continue building your resume, continue building your personal financial statement. You need to come to this with down payment. Now, you could be bringing equity investors in to help augment your down payment, but you have to have something reasonable down payment wise, and you have to also have some post-closing liquidity as well.
Okay. So now that we've talked about the different types of buyers for SBA acquisition loans, let's back up and talk about what SBA loans are. What's the benefit to the buyer, the seller, and the bank? And what is their, what are some of the basics that people should know? And then we can get into some of the newer things with the annual rule change.
You got it. So the basics of an SBA loan is this. The bank is lending you the money directly, is lending, if we're going to be talking about business acquisition in this context, the bank is lending you money directly, but the U.S. Small Business Administration, the SBA, is guaranteeing 75% of the bank's loan. You are still bringing, as the buyer and the borrower, you're still bringing in a personal guarantee. Anyone who owns 20% or more of the borrowing entity still has to personally guarantee. And it's a full unlimited guarantee. The SBA is there as really the final backstop. If something bad were to happen and it's worst case scenario, the bank or the SBA does come in and honor up to 75% of the bank's loan. However, the bank is charged with trying to liquidate everything first. If we got a PG, so we're going to be kind of liquidating personal guarantee to the extent that there's assets there. So we move against all those other things first, and then the SBA is there to honor gap guarantee. The idea is that because the SBA is there guaranteeing some of the loan, it's going to compel the lender to make a loan that is more aggressive than a sort of conventional loan. It's a longer term, 10-year term versus a conventional loan that might be 5 years, maybe 7 years. The collateral requirements are lean toward more cash flow lending. So we're going to take a lien on your personal residence if you have equity, but we're really leaning into the cash flow analysis. And that's what the SBA guarantee is there to do. It's to mitigate lack of collateral coverage, which then also, because it's a longer term, leads to a higher leveraged structure compared to a conventional loan.
Okay. Uh, Obviously, there's a cost to that. Who pays it?
Yeah, as far as there's an SBA guarantee fee that is paid to the Small Business Administration, it's roughly about 2.75% on the loan amount, just as a rough estimate. And it is paid by the borrower. Usually it is going to be folded into project cost and financed along with the project. And that fee does go to the U.S. Small Business Administration. It's kind of like an insurance policy for the transactions that sort of don't make it, and you have to honor the guarantee for that lender. The payouts are all coming out of this pool that you as the buyer are paying into on that SBA guarantee fee. So that's kind of the biggie. There's also other costs involved, business valuation, sort of UCC filings, searches, bank docs. Those are all kind of around, let's say, 10 to 15 grand. As far as the bank loan costs, the biggie is going to be that fee that goes directly to the SBA.
Now, the bank also pays the SBA an ongoing
Servicing
some
fee.
points on the
Yeah,
interest rate, right?
they do. It's called the servicing fee, and the bank does pay for that on an ongoing basis. Yes,
Yeah.
but that's not necessarily coming out of your loan,
Yeah,
your
that's coming
loan
out of your interest
proceeds.
rate that you're charging.
Hmm. Yeah,
Okay. So, uh, there's also real estate SBA programs, and
correct.
sometimes they get blended together.
Yeah, let's talk about that. So for business acquisition, oftentimes the seller might own the real estate and is selling the real estate along with that business. And to John's point, you can blend those together. If 51% or more of the purchase price is tied to the real estate, then you can amortize the entire use of proceeds over 25 years. So so it's 10 years term for the business acquisition, unless you've got that real estate portion that is 51% or more of the project cost, then the whole entire thing can allocate over 25 years. If, say, you've got a $3 million purchase price on the business and a million on the real estate, you'd blend that. And so maybe that comes out with a 14-year term because you can go 25 on the real estate and 10 on the business. I will also mention for those folks, sometimes you want to do a first right of refusal. You don't want to actually buy the real estate right up front because you want to save those extra down payment dollars for growth and settling in. If you have a first right of refusal, SBA is a really good way to come down maybe 2, 3 years later and buy your real estate. And that's a 10% down on that real estate down the road. So, and that'd be 25 years on the real estate if you're kind of going to come back and try that.
Okay. So now that we know the basics, let's go into some of the things going on. The SBA always has their changes, and banks they change what they want, and based on experience. And some of the things we talked about. Big one is always sellers who are adding back personal expenses and things. We can go from one extreme to a mega bank I talked to you about that says we won't accept any add backs. They can claim they took their vacation was a business trip, their meals were business meals, etc. But uh, what's reasonable in Northwest Bank's opinion and Lisa's opinion, since you've got
Yeah.
the experience?
Yeah, and I'm going to just kind of take this, I'm going to answer the question just from the standpoint of what's just sort of a reasonable case, regardless of kind of what brand name is on your shirt, bank wise. I'm just going to answer this from a let's just be reasonable about it. And I would say let's get back to the basics. Um, the competition out there for deals and deal flow from the buyer standpoint is really, really high. There are a lot of buyers out there. It's a good thing, but I think that there might be some sell side attempts to maybe kind of take advantage of that. I don't know, that's probably not the right way to say it, but we've been seeing a lot of ad back attempts. And so I just want everyone to get back to basics. So adding back the W-2 salary from the seller, um, W-2 salaries from maybe family members that really aren't working in the company. Those are obvious ones. The seller running their Lexus through the company when it is more of a blue collar company. That's obvious kind of stuff. We've been seeing more, like, for instance, you and I were talking as we were getting ready for the program to start. Right this week, we've got someone, a seller that built a cabin and is literally trying to put like $200,000 worth of expenses through the company and have those count as add backs. That just gets so unworkable. That is just kind of bad planning on the seller's part. So we're not going to accept something that on that kind of spectrum. And then the other part, the T&E, the travel and entertainment, John, that can get really difficult to verify. So we're going to be looking at every deal in and of itself. And the more add backs you have to verify, someone's got to verify those. Those paid receipts, invoices, and it can get really expensive to try to verify all that. And then there are just going to be some add backs that are just too cumbersome to even attempt to add back. So let's stick with some of the basics, and hopefully sellers are getting kind of better exit planning advice. And John, I know you always say this, sellers need to start planning 2 years out from their exit, and they need to clean up those add backs.
Yeah, and because if they really look at it, if you're 2 years out and you write off $100,000 of personal expenses and without state tax coming into it, that's 30, top tax brackets 37%. You're saving $37,000. But if the bank and the buyer say that's not legitimate, I'm going to have those same expenses. I'm going to go to those trade shows and stay an extra
Mhm.
week and all of
Yeah.
that. Uh, it- that's 400,000 or 500,000 or more when you multiply it. Yeah,
Yeah, that's
even at half.
the right. And
Even at
that's the
half, it's
interesting
250, 300,000.
And that's the interesting calculation that isn't made on the sell side, which I wish it were.
Yeah, that's where planning comes in. Okay. What's new with the SBA? I know one thing you said there's something going on with minority investors.
So I will also mention too, before we get there, that the SBA did change their rule on needing 100% US citizenship. Even amongst your minority investors, you can't even have, half a percent that might be for a German citizen and they're in your cap table and they're just one of your investors, silent investors. You have to have 100% US citizenships, not no longer legal permanent residents, that they don't qualify for SBA loans either. And I'm saddened by that. I'm just going to give you my little personal take there. And, there's been a lot of outcry around that 100%. And, maybe that rule will be softened again. I mean, it's been allowable my entire almost 40-year career, and I hope that one comes back. But yeah, there's some rumblings on if you have investors in your cap table that because of the citizenship rule, the SBA is now requiring that lenders input 100% of the ownership into the SBA system. It's called E-Tran. So the SBA is asking you to input 100% ownership into E-Tran, and that's the SBA system that allows you to, as a lender, input all of the required information to get your preferred SBA number before closing. And now, because 100% of the ownership is being input into the system, SBA system flags if there's any of those social security numbers that are also attached to transactions, SBA loans, we think idle as well, and other government loans where anyone in that ownership has had a default. So you could be a minority investor in this transaction. You could be a minority investor in another SBA loan completely unrelated. And if that other SBA loan has taken a tumble, you're going to be flagged then in this transaction. And at least from what we understand and what we're experiencing, it's sort of a one strike and you're out. You have anyone in your cap table that has been impacted by investing in any other deals that have gone into default, you're going to be flagged and you are not allowed, you are not eligible for an SBA loan. So what's been happening is people are sort of scrambling to replace these minority investors in cap tables because the SBA is not accepting any defaults flagged to any social security number.
And that could affect the professional investors who are funding multiple deals to whether it's 10, 20, 50 or more, 100,000
Right.
or more, and they get one bad
Right.
one, they can't do it again.
Correct. That's what we're seeing. We are not sure if it's just an unintended consequence because now of the rolling off of the citizenship rule and needing 100% input of the ownership. We don't know if it's an unintended consequence or if the SBA really intended it to sort of cut this deeply. We're not sure. We're all sort of investigating that. But where we stand right now, it is sort of a one strike and you're out.
Okay. Now, you've told me the SBA has gone back to liquidity standards after the deal closes or at closing.
Yeah, post-closing liquidity. Is that what you're talking about?
Yep.
Yeah. So I think that it is more lender to lender, maybe not necessarily being mandated or coming from the SBA, but I think that my observation from how lenders are approaching business acquisition, coming off of maybe heightened defaults and heightened portfolio declines, kind of just going back to basics, making sure that your buyers, your guarantors, have liquidity to contribute to the acquisition. So getting to the table, but then also making sure that there are post-closing, reasonable post-closing liquidity post-close as well. So kind of just getting back to some basics.
Okay. What about on the other end, on having too much liquidity to get an SBA loan?
Yeah, so that was a rule that actually had been softened I'm losing track of time here, John. That was softened like 2 years ago. And that one is back now. That one is back where it was softened before, where you weren't necessarily considered too liquid, but the too liquid is now back, where you could have too much money post close in the eyes of the SBA, i.e., it's called credit elsewhere, where you could have enough credit and liquidity available to you to finance this via conventional or maybe finance the whole thing yourself. And therefore, you don't need an SBA loan. There is in the SBA SOPs, standard operating procedures, there is not a uniform calculation as to what's too liquid, quote unquote. The calculation is done on a lender by lender basis. And what I'm hearing is that kind of 1.5 times the loan amount is probably a good basis for considering if you are too liquid, meaning if we're doing, a $3.5 million loan, let's say, you would then be able to have what, 5 million and change in post-closing liquidity. I think that's what I've been hearing. There are some lenders that will give you more room. There are some that are going to give you less. So if you're
Okay.
on the PFS side, on the stronger side, definitely check in with your lender.
And that's liquidity. It's not real estate or IRAs.
Correct.
Okay.
Correct.
Okay.
401k and real estate are excluded. So stocks, bonds, um, fungible traded stocks and bonds.
Yeah. Okay. Uh, Another one you wanted to talk about was you said the 5% equity SBA rules.
Yeah. So one of the nuances with the SBA is from a down payment perspective, the SBA does require a minimum of 10% down. The way that you can make this up, though, with one of their rules is 5% of that 10% can come in the form of a standby seller note. No principal and interest being paid for the entire length of the loan. So full standby. 5% of the 10% can be in the form of the standby seller note. The other 5% at minimum has to come from the buyer. And that could be a combination of the buyer's cash and maybe some equity investors as well. So, I mean, these loans are already meant, SBA 7A loans for business acquisition are already meant to be highly leveraged. So this rule with SBA, where literally you're getting like 95% financing, and so I'm going to give you my personal banker perspective on this. We just want to be very judicious in when we're applying this SBA rule. Just because SBA has a rule and it can be really aggressive doesn't mean a lender to lender is going to kind of allow that rule to be executed. So for us, we're working on a few right now where we do have a 5% down payment and then that 5% standby. We're also then requiring additional seller note on top of it. Again, that 95% finance leverage with the lender kind of taking the brunt of that risk on. It feels a lot better if it's a little bit more balanced with the seller maybe taking then extra seller note where that maybe has some principal and interest payment on it. We're looking at things like industry experience in this case. How professionalized is the company? If the buyer is coming in with 5% because that's all they have and we're literally taking every last dollar, that may not be the best time to deploy this rule, but we are using it.
Yeah. Well, I don't like I would not recommend that people try to get in at 5%. It really should have, to my opinion, it should apply to management family buying out and there's continuity and the seller knows who they are and has worked with them, et cetera, et cetera. But just to say, I want to buy a larger deal and I can only put in 5%, I'd tell a seller, don't do it. Don't take that 5% on full standby.
Agree with you 100%, John. In the two cases we're doing it, we have manager buyouts where they've been working there and they're, legitimately, really running the company. That's working for us. We have another one where we're doing it where they have really, really good industry experience and they have a lot of industry contacts and it's not a really big loan. It's not, so from a risk perspective, it seemed a little balanced, but in every other case, John, we are definitely taking your tact on that 5%. We're using it very sparingly. But there
How
are
are
some
you?
banks, there's some SBA lenders that just lead with that
Yes.
rule. lead with that in their marketing. And well, that's just probably not a fit for us.
Do you, how many of the loans you do, not counting these kind, are at the 10% minimum equity injection versus you wanting them to put in 15 or 20?
Yeah, great question. And again, one thing we haven't talked about here is debt service coverage. We're also guardrailed by debt service coverage, historic ability for the company as is to pay the debt. So, from a debt service perspective, we're probably seeing half of the transactions we do, you need more than 10 to 15% down because of the multiple. Like, for instance, in MSP, those are kind of trading at 5 or 6 times multiple. So in order to make the deal pencil at say a minimum of a 1.4 debt service coverage in the last full year, our buyers are coming in with 15, 20, maybe even 30% down. And I'd say about half the deals we do, it is well more than the 10% down minimum due to that debt service coverage.
Yeah. Well, that leads us into your gotchas, and that's one of them is the uh, discretionary cash flow and debt coverage and all of that. You've done a good job of explaining it. 1.4. Now, you used to always be 1.5 to 1 or more.
Correct. At Northwest, we are 1.4 in the last full year. And we're also looking at preceding years as well. So um, just credit, you know, underwriting and prudent credit kind of perspectives. We're also looking at each one of the trends as well. So 1.4 in the last full year, and then we're looking for, something well better than minimum break even in 24, and then we're looking at how everything's performing in 23. But yeah, did get a skosh improvement on the 1.4. But hey, I'm not opposed to a 1.5 or better. And again, it's all about points of view. And most of the clients we work with are bringing in more equity so that even minimum debt service coverages are higher even for their own standard.
Yeah, and I tell people at least 1.5, and if you're doing a small deal with the lower end of the SBA range, lower half, you probably want 2 to 1 because that's cash flow to grow the business. And I think that's what gets lost when everyone wants so highly leveraged. What are you going to do after you're in there and you're paying everything? You've got such skinny debt coverage or skinny cash flow because of
Yeah.
all the debt payments.
And also, if you're getting in there to grow the company, growth isn't free.
No,
You
it
know,
sucks
it
cash.
costs you money. Yeah, you need cash. And it's not to grow, you're not just taking your operating income. That your existing cash flows just to keep the company maintenance wise. You need extra infusion of cash to grow the company. And most of the time, our clients are actually better than that minimum 1.4 just because they're bringing extra to the table.
So let's go through your gotchas, which sound a lot
Okay.
like mine. Uh, Customers.
Yeah. So the quantitative part of this is actually the easiest part, like actually calculating what the debt service is or coming up with your debt service and all of that's easy. It's really the qualitative overlay of that that's the hard part. And so customer concentration, John, we see a lot of customer concentration in this lower middle market SBA space. And customer concentration is one of the top three things we see. And I know sometimes maybe some buyers might try to just assume, oh, the seller wasn't working hard enough, or I'll come in and I'll add clients very quickly, et cetera. And that adding customers is just really hard. The seller would have done it already. They're not lazy, and they have the network. You don't. So taking customer concentration seriously is one of the top three things. We're going to do a downside analysis generally around any customer or revenue channel that has 20% or more concentration. And we just want to see if that customer leaves, you can't retain that customer. What happens? Can you still pay the bank back? You might not be paying the seller note. That might go on pause. But we want to see how the company performs with the debt if you lose one of those key customers.
It's a good, yeah, that's a good analysis. So, not just saying what happens if revenue goes down or something, but what if this one customer leaves us?
Yeah. And that leaves a big hole. There's other things that you can't really quantify in a spreadsheet. If you lose a key customer, that's going to have some disruption to your operations.
Yeah. And most businesses are, and rightfully so, they lag on getting rid of people. So the customer says, I'm leaving. They don't first say, I'm getting rid of three people. They say, okay, we'll fight through it.
Yeah, for sure. Because
Okay.
then you got to pivot.
Owner dependency.
Yeah, this is another one, John. You and I have been talking about this one for years, especially on the smaller transactions. And I'm not here to say small transactions aren't good because they could be a perfectly great fit for people, especially if it's going to probably be easier to find a smaller deal than a larger one. But then generally, the seller can be wearing lots of hats. They could be, the estimator, the salesperson, and kind of the office manager. When you're seeing the seller wearing multiple hats, that's kind of a red flag. You've got to get into it and really understand what the seller's roles are, and can you realistically replace the seller yourself, and or are you going to have to pull in additional employees to help backfill what the seller's doing? And sometimes the seller is doing such a key fulfilling a key role that you really can't replace them. And then this is the nuance with SBA loans. If you are buying 100% of the company, the seller can only stay on for up to a year, and it has to be in a 1099 or a consulting role. They cannot be an employee, and then only up to a year. Where
In
maybe
writing.
convention in in writing, we'll leave it at that. In writing, uh, where in conventional loans you could have like seller rolling equity and
Yeah.
things that to solve for that dependency. In SBA land, a seller dependency could be a deal breaker.
Yeah. I see it. Like you just mentioned, they're doing something so key that others are going to have a hard time, the buyer's going to have a hard time doing it. Or like we have a client now in the CPA firm, and we are telling them you should not be doing any bookkeeping. You have a business that's making a couple $1 million a year. You should not be doing bookkeeping.
That's why sellers need to work with you, John, you and Jessica ahead of time, where you can kind of take that 2 years to, plan for, a smooth exit and a nice presentation to the buyers and the buyers'
Yeah.
lenders.
Well, let's move on. Cultural fit.
Yeah, this is in one of my top five sort of gotchas, and cultural fit is so hard to diligence up ahead of time. It is so hard to diligence ahead of time. Could you actually see yourself sitting at that desk doing the work, doing the job? Because you're coming off of sort of spreadsheeting and modeling the acquisition, but could you literally see yourself being at the store or the shop, or working with the kinds of employees that business has, or working and interacting with the kinds of customers that the business has? So that could you really envision yourself doing and being there? And then the other part is that's really hard to diligence is how has the seller really operated the company? What's the feel of the shop or the store? Um, and especially if you can't meet any of the employees, and maybe doing a site visit during work hours is difficult from a confidentiality perspective, or whatever the nuances are about you getting in prior to close, that cultural fit can be sometimes a real shock or a surprise once you hit day one post close. And John, how do you prepare that conversation on cultural fit?
You have to talk. You have to ask questions. In my book on business buying, there's a story of an accountant who thought it'd be really cool to make things, and he bought a cabinet shop. And there's a good long story in there, but the short version is he could not identify at all with the employees.
Mm,
They were, I will be here from 7 to 3:30 and I'm out. And, on breaks, I'm going out to smoke a cigarette or just get away. Whereas he's going, I'm living and breathing this thing all the time. Why aren't they?
hmm
And the culture was horrible and he was losing money. But he also, there's other parts about how he overpaid and got swindled on an accountant getting swindled by stuff on the books. But
Oh
he
no.
just couldn't identify.
Yeah. And sometimes you have a really good business and you have a really good buyer. They just don't fit on that deal.
Yeah.
You could have a great buyer, just not a fit for that one. And um, you've got to try to try to work through that part of it. And it's in my top five gotchas. But unfortunately,
Yeah.
what happens is sometimes you don't know until you're already in there.
Yeah. But you do know if you're buying a construction related company, manufacturing, landscaping, you're going to have blue collar workers. Some are highly skilled, but they're still workers. And these are not the people that are going to be involved in strategy sessions.
Right.
Yeah. We covered debt coverage, working capital. It is always you know, you were at our event in January and it was interesting because all five panelists, we were all in uniform. Working capital goes with the business and
Hmm.
it's an asset just like the machines. Uh, but you want to see adequate working capital.
Right. This is probably one of the more awkward parts of the conversation, I think, between buyer and seller. And it sort of depends on how um, prepared the seller is for this conversation. The Basically, I've always said this: if you don't buy the working capital from the seller, you got to buy it from the bank. So it's not free. If it is not part of the purchase price, then you are in effect, if there's a one-to-one exchange, because then you have to buy the working capital from me, and that costs. There's a cost to that. So up front for the bank, we need to know how much of that working capital is being left in the business as part of the purchase price, because that's then we have to then be able to do our analysis on, okay, how much more potentially do we need to build in term working capital? And then we need to right size that line of credit. If if no money is being left in as an asset on that working capital, it makes just the structuring, it puts a lot of pressure on the structuring. And that working capital, again, if you don't buy it from the seller, you buy it from me.
Yeah, and a lot of owners don't understand at all, and they'll say things like, "Well, I made the sales; those should be my receivables." Well, you're getting paid five times your profit, and it's almost all goodwill.
Yeah.
No,
And you have such a great perspective, John, because you represent buyers and sellers, right? So you've
yeah,
worked, kind of both sides of the table, if you will.
we've got a seller now, and they haven't understood it. I think they're getting there, but the good news is their attorney does, so that really
Good.
helps. So
That
I'm going to
that
add one to
definitely
your
helps.
gotchas. If the business is
Please
not
do.
growing,
Mm,
you know, you really need to find out why. And being stable doesn't uh, do much. I saw a business recently that was on the market, and they stable sales over the last 5 years. Well, just use a number like whether it's 5 million or 10 million. Uh, Inflation's been 25% up 25% over that time. That 5 million is four. That 10 million is really eight.
yeah. And what's interesting about that is the top line could be stable, quote unquote, but there could be a lot of churn within that too.
Yeah,
The customers leaving and they're having to fill that bucket. So the churn in that could actually make stable, um, really what presents as stable, maybe very unstable. So just the top line, you've got to figure out what's happening within that, within those numbers.
yeah,
And that lends itself or leads itself to valuation as well. From the bank perspective, we really analyze that on an SBA basis, kind of getting in and doing no harm. So at least if the company's doing as good as, that's how we're going to analyze it. But the growth really does still matter in there, to your point. And the business valuation, I think, is going to sort of discount it, to your point, if there hasn't been any growth at all.
Okay, so Lisa, any final thoughts? And then how do people get a hold of you at your rather new bank? New
Yeah,
bank for
thank you.
you, not a new
The
bank.
new bank for me. I was just going to say new bank for me. Northwest's been around and growing, and they have a real collaborative culture, which is really fantastic. So, just would love to talk with buyers that are in the space. And I think, John, I've always talked about this. I mean, there's a lot of turmoil going on out there. It seems like there's always something going on, but we have kind of wars and just kind of political strife and tariffs, maybe not tariffs. We've got all of that going on, but it's always a good time to acquire a company if it's a really good company and you've got a good buyer fit. It seems like in our lower middle market space, there's always room for this business acquisition, and it literally has to happen. So, with all the noise going on out there, there's always stuff going on out there. So, just um, be optimistic, but practical, I would say. And if you want to contact me, real easy, you can send me a LinkedIn. That's super easy. I'm also at lisa.forrest@northwest.com.
Great. Well, Lisa, thank you again. Our annual talk about acquisition loans, and I wish you well with as you proceed on with you and Sarah and you proceed on with Northwest Bank.
Appreciate it. Thanks so
Thanks for
much.
being here.